What's up YouTube, Del here from Zephyr, and today I'm going to bring you the deck that I took to the EUWCQ, and that is of course Yubel Fiendsmith. Now I missed out on day 2 by one kind of point. Technically if I'd drawn one of my losses then I would have made it into day 2. I did take it into a side event as well, so what I'm going to do in this particular profile is not going to give you the basic layout that everyone does, but I'm going to lay the deck out in different sections, so stuff like starters, the bricks, the extenders, the hand traps and everything else, and just provide you with as much information about this deck as possible. So with all of that out of the way, please smash that like button, hit that notification bell and subscribe so you don't miss out on any more upcoming content. So obviously at the EUWCQ, I ended up playing 11 rounds of Swiss and I ended up losing 4 of them, winning 6 of them. One of those losses could have very easily been turned into a draw, but I messed up a little bit and it was the first time I'd kind of misplayed the deck that entire weekend. On top of that as well, my losses came to Gimmick Puppet FTK, Tempai, and then a Melodious. So it was kind of like some odd matchups, but Tempai was definitely my weakness on the Saturday, and that's where I changed up a couple of cards for the Sunday. So going off with your starters. So with all of the starters in the deck, we've got with Samsara the Lotus, you've got your 1 Dark Beckoning Beast and triple Opening Spirit Gates. Technically as well, you've got your Fiendsmith Engravers and of course your Tract, followed up by your Nightmare Throne because it can lead you into Samsara or of course Dark Beckoning, Terraforming, and then with a monster discard you also have the 1-for-1. Now this lineup is pretty standard for most particular builds. The only change that I have personally made is I've made Dark Beckoning a 1 of rather than a 2 of. Now I have no issue if you want to be making it a 2 of, that is completely up to you and it's just a personal preference on which one you want to go for. But the idea, the way that I saw it is technically when you're looking at all of this, you end up with what, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. So you've got 16 starters in the main deck. I never had an issue of not seeing a starter. On top of that as well, your main starters in the form of the Fiendsmith, the Dark Beckoning and your Samsara all have massive weaknesses. However, when you combo these off with a second one of these starters, that's when you start to really be able to play and play for a lot of interruptions. So what I mean by that is, if I activate Opening Spirit Gates, it puts my opponent in a difficult situation because it's like, okay, well, if I ash this, if they normal summon a Samsara, the Samsara is pretty much going to resolve unless they've got an imperm. So more times than not, people will allow you to resolve the Opening Spirit Gates. You add Dark Beckoning, you may get drolled at that point. Other than that, you normal summon down Dark Beckoning, they imperm it, and that is a very strong sticking point. And that's where Nightmare Throne comes into play because you activate Nightmare Throne, which will allow you to destroy Spirit in the deck, which then allows you to get into Yubel. So there are loads of ways of playing around with it, which is why you need to play so many starters, and opening up a combination of these is massively important. Some of them are better starters on their own, ideally stuff like Samsara the Lotus and Opening Spirit Gates, and some of them are still just as good with other cards involved like Tract and of course 1-for-1. But the best thing that this deck can do is that the whole Fiendsmith engine can get you into the Yubel engine, and the Dark Beckoning Beast get you into the Yubel as well. So you've got so many different ways to get to your core component of the deck, it's absolutely insane. So that's pretty much it for the starters. These are the ones you want to be going to first. These are the weakest spots to be hit in the deck as well. So if you were to try and imperm or stop anything, obviously the ones you want to be targeting is the Dark Beckoning and the Samsara. But keep in mind, because they have so many different other 1-card starters, they'll be able to continue to play through it as well. Moving on to the extenders. Now, what I'm kind of counting as the extenders is cards that just allow you to get a little bit more to the board, but you will need other components to work for you. So for example, you've got the Shavara. Shavara can be a bit of a targeted protector as well because you can activate it as a quick effect in order to pop one of the cards that may be targeted and still resolve its effect. You've then, of course, you've got your Gruesome Grey Squirmer. This, of course, is an extender if you control a Fiend monster, and this is going to allow you to extend to the board, giving you an additional level 1 Fiend that is 0/0 that you can then utilize in order to go into Yama plays, heck, go straight into your Fiendsmith plays, as well as then being able to banish it from the graveyard to summon back a Fiend of 0/0. I'm then kind of counting the Spirit of Yubel in the middle of between the extenders to the bricks. Now what I mean by that is if it's just on its own, unless your opponent is going to attack during the battle phase and you summon it down as a protector at that point, it is technically a brick. But it's also an extender because when you combo it off with Nightmare Throne, when you're going to be destroying it, or even Nightmare Pain, this will then allow you to float into Yubel, which then counts as an extender, and of course it is there utilized to get you into your Phantom of Yubel. Another thing to mention of the reason that I was playing the 1 Dark Beckoning Beast is 99.999% of the time, If this is going to get stopped by an imperm or a Veiler and you haven't got a way to extend past it, you may lose that game. However, more times than not, when you are able to extend, which is probably more consistent than anything, or when you're able to resolve this fully, you're going to be spinning it back into the deck with your Phantom of Yubel. So the only benefit you get of adding in a second copy of a Dark Beckoning Beast is you go up to 17 starters rather than 16. And to me, honestly, when I was trying to fit in Crossout Designator, which I'll talk about a little bit later on, it was kind of a worthwhile sacrifice. So carrying on from the extenders into the bricks. Now these are the cards you don't ever really want to see in your hand, but by God, you will see them in your hand. And that is of course your Chaos Summoning Beast, Yubel, Yubel Terra Incarnate, and Fabled Lorry. Technically, you could also consider your Abominable Chamber on its own as well as a technical brick, but you just have to kind of see around with it. So you can see that we play just as many bricks as we do extenders. Now, obviously, with the definition of bricks, it just does nothing on its own. Lorry does a little bit on its own, because technically you could still normal summon down the Lorry, turn it into a Requiem, and then go off the play that way. But you really don't want to be using your normal summon on the Fiendsmith engine where at all possible. So when you're looking at all of these, they do very little, if not anything, in the hand at all on their own. But more times than not, Yubel and Terra is going to be quite helpful in order for you to get into a Phantom of Yubel before you've even conducted a search or an activated effect or anything else in between. The Chaos Summoning Beast is a risky brick that you play because the idea is that through Dark Beckoning, or more so the Opening of Spirit Gates, it becomes the one card combo. Because you go Opening Spirit Gate, search out Dark Beckoning, normal summon Dark Beckoning, and unfortunately because it can't search itself, you're either then forced to search out another Gates, which isn't going to get you anywhere, or of course you search the Chaos Summoning Beast. Now again, that's still useful because even if you do open up the Chaos Summoning Beast, like I've said, because you're playing so many starters, technically you are playing an additional 6 starters to this element that you've got here, but then you are playing 3 times the amount of starters as you are extenders and 3 times the amount of starters that you are of bricks. So it's kind of burying them down, which is why this deck is a 45 card deck rather than a baseline 40 deck, because I want to bury these as much as possible. So that's it for the bricks and the extenders. Moving on to just the generic utility cards, I went with 1 Nightmare Pain and the 1 Mature Chronicle. Now I know instantly a lot of people are like, whoa, why are you not playing a second Nightmare Pain? And the reason for that was, more times than not, if I already open up the Pain, my first search, even if I don't open it up, my first search is going to be Nightmare Pain. Like, that's no question whatsoever. But the way I kind of thought about it was, if I had already opened up Pain, or if my opponent's banished my Pain, how else am I going to get it back bar playing a card like Mature Chronicle? Mature Chronicle actually put in a heck of a lot of work because number 1, not a lot of people were expecting it. Number 2, a lot of people forget that it has all of these different multiple effects that will allow you to do everything you need to. Yes, of course, it is a bit of a pain and it is a bit of a brick if you're not able to get some Yubel cards into rotation. However, in a deck like this, when you're able to be sending Yubels to the graveyard, reviving them, going into Phantom of Yubels, normal summoning and everything else in between, you should be able to gain counters on this one very, very easily. So for those of you unaware of this, you get to special summon a Yubel monster by removing 1 counter from this card, and you gain counters every time you special summon a monster that is Yubel or mentions Yubel, and it is mandatory to place that counter on it. Remove 2, add 1 of your banished cards to your hand. You have no idea how many times I activated this to add Tracked back from the Banish Zone to my hand. It was great and it allowed me to use 2 Tracked without having to play 2 Tracked. On top of that as well, it does allow you to add back stuff like Phantom of Yubel if you do banish it off of the back of the Aerial Eater, put it back into the extra deck. On top of that as well, it also helps you get back your targets they might have Bestial banished. And then of course you've got 3, banish 1 card for the deck, very rare you're actually going to use that. 4, destroy 1 card on the field, which is great when your opponent puts up floodgates. Because if you're under a floodgate, like for example, there can only be 1 and you're just slowly moving a Yubel on and then off the board, you're able to then kind of build up your counters and then destroy that card. And then 5, you get to add a Super Poly. So if you really wanted to, you could side in a Super Poly, but it was absolutely fine. And obviously the idea was add 1 of your banished cards to your hand. Again, allowed me to, if my opponent Cosmic Cyclone my Pain, add it back. I've already got a way to add this back from the graveyard with the Opening of Spirit Gates, and as long as I control a level 10. So I was like, at the worst case scenario, right, if they destroy this, and I search out a Mature Chronicle, yes, of course, it would activate the exact same thing about getting a second Nightmare Pain, which is absolutely fine. But I kind of felt like I like the idea that if Pain is still on the board, I had my ways to kind of recycle back into Mature Chronicle. Because like I said, more times than not, the only time if my opponent got rid of this that I would want a second one is if they banish it. And I felt that having the versatility of what Mature Chronicle could provide with the other effects just made this a little bit better and worthwhile of playing. And it actually did put in a lot of work. There was no point that I ever missed a second Pain. Like every time I needed to get to a second Pain, I would just go Mature Chronicle, get 2 Yubels into rotation to protect whatever I want to try and resolve, effect, add this back to my hand, activate this, and then I just started to build up tokens on this one. More times than not, I was completing an OTK after I'd done that anyway, just because I've got the Pain back, activate the Pain, use Pain's effect, and go from there. You can also add back a grey squirrel from the Banish Zone, which is massively helpful, and I did that a couple of times as well. Moving on to the hand traps. So for the hand traps, I went with Triple Ash Blossom, pretty standard that one. I main decked the Double Draw on Lockbird. Sometimes it's actually put in a lot of work, sometimes it put in no work at all. So it's one of them grey area hand traps you can kind of take out, put in, do whatever you want with, really. I went with one Nibiru and one Effect Veiler, so these were the one-offs as cross-out targets, but these were less reliable. It was more so Effect Veiler that needed to be a cross-out target. You could very easily take out Nibiru for a Mole Chummy, but honestly, I think Mole Chummy is something that's going to be sided in rather than maining in some decks, so that's something just to keep an eye on. I then made a decision for day 2. So in day 1, I was playing 3 Infinite Impermanences, and the way that I kept losing to Tenpai is that they kept deciding to go first in game 3, and then they would Kokimiru lock me, and I was like, okay, well, I was kind of expecting you to go first, so I guess I need to see Ash to stop the spheres, or I need to see Imperm to turn off the Drago, and even then, they would usually summon out the Drago once I've already put a monster on the board. So I decided to side in for day 2. I went to main 2 Forbidden Chalice. Now, this was a card that a couple of people were playing around with, and Sam and Kyron ended up playing in their sides. But the idea behind this one is, even if they put the Kokimiru Drago on the board, you can activate Chalice, negate its effect, even if you've got a monster on the board. So it puts them into a kind of false sense of security when they're like, yeah, cool, you've got a monster on the board, activate spheres, bounce a card back, great, summon out Drago, haha, lockout, I win. And you just go, okay, cool, activate Chalice. You'd get the exact same effect you would have as an Imperm, but you're able to play around while you've already got a card on the board. On top of that as well, Chalice does have additional effects. Obviously, you kind of sacrifice the ability that it can't be activated from the hand like a hand trap during your opponent's turn in the form of Imperm, but it did give you that ability to kind of do the exact same job that Imperm did, just with a little bit extra on top of it. And then for basically hand trap deterrence, I went with 2 Triple Tactic Talents, pretty standard on this one. This one actually won me a Tenpai matchup because I stole their Drago and then tributed off the Drago for my Fiendsmith. You know, needs must. And then, of course, I went with the main deck of the 3 Crossout Designator and the 1 Caught by the Grave. Just throughout testing at the local environment and everything else, Crossout put in huge amounts of work. Because there's a lot of times where I was like, okay, cool, I can play around a couple of hand traps, but there might be that 3rd hand trap that I need to stop. I actually found this deck can just play through Droll very easily because there's a lot of ways that you can send your cards from the deck to the grave and then add them from the grave back to the hand. So Droll wasn't as big of a Crossout Designator hit as I initially first thought, but it was still massively helpful to have that as an option to negate it. On top of that as well, just being able to use this, obviously the Effect Veiler involvement with Designator was more so from the local environment, and again, same for Nibiru, because what it would happen is more times than not, I would make Phantom very early, my opponent would activate a hand trap that I didn't feel that I could play through, and I would decide to use the Phantom on it to get another card back into rotation, because then you can make a second Phantom, and then they would hold back a Nibiru, and I was like, okay, cool, well, I've at least got Crossout for that one. It kind of gave you the benefit as well because Phantom can't stop Imperm, but Crossout can. So this one actually put in a heck of a lot of work for me. I didn't see it as much as I would have liked to at Euros, but then I also don't feel that it would have been as effective for me as it would have been at Euros, because I think a lot of the times when people were dropping hand traps on me, the deck was just capable enough to play through it. There was never a point where they went hand trap 1, hand trap 2, and then the dreaded hand trap 3 that completely stopped my turn. More times than not, yes, okay, people might be a little bit new to the deck and how it functioned and kind of was a little bit cautious on when to activate and kind of miss some of those trigger timings. But then there are those odd scenarios where you're like, okay, cool, my hand's quite weak. Normal summon Samsara, please don't have an Ash, please don't have an Ash, please don't have an Ash, Samsara, Ash. And you're like, Whereas if you then open up as many chances as possible to open up something like a Call By and a Crossout, you have ways of stopping them if they've got an Imperm or if they've got the Ash. It's very difficult because more times than not, Dark Beckoning, like I said, people are so eager to Imperm that. That's when you want to try and protect it if at all possible. And again, same with Samsara de Lois. A lot of people are so eager to Ash Blossom that they hold the Imperm back for later on. And then that's where you're able to play through an additional hand trap with something like Crossout Designator. So that's it for the entire main deck, a full-on 45 card deck. Like I said, I tried to lay this out a little bit differently because the list isn't exactly massively unique. The only two changes is that I play Mature Chronicle and I play one Dark Beckoning Beast rather than two, and I bump it up to a 45 card deck. But even then, most builds like that are kind of that kind of layout. So I wanted to kind of explain as much as I possibly can so you can kind of see my thought process behind choosing the particular card layout that I did and kind of go from there. Moving on to the extra deck. So the extra deck has had a couple of changes since the last build that I did, but again, pretty standard. So 2 Phantom of Yubels. This card is just absolutely amazing. There are times when you really want to be playing a third, but then I feel that the more and more you get used to the deck and the more and more you get used to the ways that you can recycle this card with stuff like your Nightmare Throne, that's when you're actually comfortable playing with 2. Aerial Eater, and of course the other TCG exclusive of the Neko Quit. Both of these are amazing additions to the deck. Neko Quit obviously makes the Fiendsmith combo off of Tracked and everything else, a 1-card combo rather than a 2-card combo. And the Aerial Eater gives you that balance of what Beatrice might do for you, but is more direct because this one will allow you to set up, send in a Samsara D Lotus or a Spirit of Yubel from deck to the graveyard, and then you can go down a Muckrucker route to bring it back from the graveyard. You've got gates of, opening the Spirit gates that can then bring it back for you as well without having to Fiend lock you. Yes, it's a little bit more linear because of what it does is it literally only sends a Fiend, but then it has that ability to banish 2 monsters of the same attribute and level 6 or higher Fiend monsters with the same attribute from the graveyard to summon it back. And that can then help you get into your rank 6 of your DDD High Wave King. And that I did use a couple of times. And again, a lot of people forgot about that because they thought they burnt me out of all my resources. They'd used up all of theirs. And I was like, okay, cool. Aerial Eater attack, Savara attack, main phase 2, overlay, and then go into a Wave King. And then that would cause them issues because then they would just top decking. Lacrima is just in here purely for the burn factor, really. The burn and revival effect is really, really important, but more times than not, if you haven't got access to something like a Lotus or a Throne or anything else, you're going to be going down this route more times than not, and that's why you always had technical direct access to a starter in a form or another. The Lacrima is obviously amazing for burn damage. It's also amazing to not have to burn through both of these cards in your extra deck, and then sometimes it does help you without Fiend locking yourself. For the XYZs, we've got the one Varudras. It's a little bit more tricky to actually make more. Yes, of course, it is consistent when you have like the perfect 1-card or 2-card combos, but it can still be an absolute game changer to have this on your board, considering Yubel is one of the very few decks that can actually set up multiple Omni-Negates. Now, on day 1, on the Saturday, I actually decided to play Desiree and Varudras because I thought more people would be on board breakers rather than playing Appaloosa. On day 2, I took the Desiree out and I actually went back to the Appaloosa. Didn't really see much of a big difference, to be completely honest with you. So I might be bouncing back and forth between the Desiree and the Appaloosa. The other one that was kind of questionable in that slot of what I would take out was the Muckrucker, and I actually decided to put it back in because I felt that there were so many times when this would actually come up clutch and put in so much work for you. Yes, the biggest downside is it shuts off the Varudras. However, the fact that it can just bring you back your Fiends still gives you that ability to go down a Wave King route. It still gives you the ability to loot back your Fiend monsters from the graveyard with your Lacrima and of course your Sequence, and then it also gave me access to Yama and everything else in between. Another card that I would probably highly consider maybe putting back in here if I was happy to get rid of the Appaloosa would be the Nightmare Griffin, because then even when you basically get the double benefit, because on the Saturday what I was doing is I was using the Muckrucker to bring back a Fiend from the graveyard and then go into the Desiree. Whereas now I feel that it could be a little bit better to be going round into a Nightmare Griffin instead. But that really does come down to personal preference and a bit more testing, and I'll kind of like decide which side of the fence I'll sit on that one. The last XYZ, of course, is your Triple D High Wave King Caesar. It's very easy to out. You just imperm it and they go, okay. But they have to out it. And if they can't out it, it is incredibly powerful because there are so many spells, traps, and monster effects that try to summon a monster and you just go, nope. And they try and do it again, you go, nope. And it's actually really, really important that this card works. Then for the Link monsters, pretty standard on this one. Requiem, yay. SP Little Knight, standard, comes off the back of Rage and Yama. And then, of course, Sequence, incredibly cracked card. If they were going to ban anything in the Fiendsmith engine, I highly expect that Moon of the Close Heavens would be banned on the next ban list, which could probably put to their argument why both of these are commons, because then they're like, oh, well, you can still play the Fiendsmith engine, you just can't be as broken as you possibly want it to be. But more times than not, I probably think Moon of the Close Heavens will probably get purely because it's like, this is the one that instigates the Fiendsmith engine to be a degenerate engine and like be splashed in everything. If you get rid of this, it then becomes hard open up a Fiendsmith or a Light Fiend. Otherwise, you're not accessing the Fiendsmith engine. And some people might be like, well, maybe that's not going to be worth the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 slots in my extra deck. Some people might be like, yeah, okay, it's worth it. I'll still play it. So I would not be surprised if Konami did decide with their creativity of info decks to go, let's get rid of this common. And then Muckrucker, and then of course Appaloosa. So like I said, I and ahed, bounced back between which one of these three I would put in the main deck, or the extra deck, sorry. On the Saturday, it was these two, and Desiree did put in a lot of work for me, to be fair. And on the Sunday, it was these two, and it didn't really get enough time to show me why it was worth it. So this is why I'm like, you know what, if Konami go, we're going to get rid of Moon of the Close Heavens, we're going to get rid of Appaloosa on the next ban list, I'll be like, okay, cool. One will be Desiree, one will be Nightmare Griffin. Deck stays pretty much the same. So that's it for the entire main deck and the entire extra deck. I'm going to take you through my side deck and give you as much information as possible on my siding patterns and everything else. So I just decided to go with 2 Nibiru. Put them in once or twice, never saw them. I knew Ritual beasts were running around, and I knew some people were getting a little bit lapsical and were kind of just running into Nibiru territory. So I wanted to make sure that I had the option to do it if I needed to. But honestly, never saw it, never needed it, probably will get rid of it. I decided to go with Fiendsmith because everyone was on the Fiendsmith engine. I was like, you know what? I'm not the biggest fan of Molchummy because Molchummy just pretty much goes, drop it, see it and drop it, and if you don't, it doesn't do anything. Whereas what I liked about Fiendsmith is Fiendsmith gave that ability. It was more consistent because it can be used whether you've got cards or not. It also worked with the Bestials, which means I didn't need to hold back my Bestials or hope that I drew a Bestial off of a Molchummy to be actively resolved. It allowed me to put some of the bricks back into the deck and give me a bit of a new hand. And on top of that, it also provided me with targeted protection should my opponent try to imperm me or even rage me in the mirror match. I then went with 2 Dino Rest of the Prankatops. This actually put in a lot of work in a Tempai matchup because the idea is that you would go second and they've gone down with a Drago. You special summon down Prankatops, you go Prankatops, kill the Drago, main phase 2, start making your plays. On top of that as well, it also special summon down Prankatops. They would then be forced to use spheres to bounce it back because they were fearful of it. And you go, okay, cool, I'll have this back. Summon out the Drago, special summon down Prankatops, kill the Drago, go again. So you can kind of see how useful this can be. And it's also massively helpful against Floodgate decks. And it was massively helpful in my pure stun matchup because I was able to go, okay, cool, special summon down Prankatops, Prankatops attack. Prankatops attack. And now I had the strongest monster on the board, and because I was under my own skill drain, it treats as cost, so I never found that as a bit of an issue. The last 2 monsters, the 2 Druid Swarm, well, not 2 Druid, 2 Bestials, 1 Magnamute, 1 Druid Swarm. Honestly, I'm in an in between this and DD Crow. I felt that DD Crow had a bit more utility. I felt DD Crow had a bit more variety. But honestly, I went with the Bestials. I think a lot of people were on them, and I was like, okay, cool, let's see how this works. On top of that as well, more times than not, you can actually put this into your main deck and then just use them as cross-out targets because so many people were on them. Very rarely did I see these. My Bestial, my Tempai opponent saw them every damn game. Literally. Game 1, in the first Tempai matchup, open up Magnamute. The second Tempai matchup, open up Magnamute. The third Tempai matchup, open up Magnamute. I was like, bro, you didn't even search them, and you've got them. But yeah, they pretty much do what they say on the tin. I went with triple Cosmic Cyclone. I've seen a build that actually plays 2 Cosmic Cyclone and a Harpy's Feather Duster. I can kind of agree with that. I don't mind that. But the idea was that Cosmic Cyclone, there were so many people expecting Beatrice to be utilised to get access to stuff like Anti-Spell Fragrance, and other kind of Floodgate lockout cards. I felt Cosmic Cyclone would actually put in a lot of work for me. I saw it once or twice, puts in a bit of work, but even then, I wasn't like, these are one of these cards that you want to have and not need, than need and not have. Like, you have to have back row I hate in your deck. And the final card I went with was Skill Drain. I highly expect this will be hit to 1, if not banned in the next ban list, but this puts in a lot of work for the deck, purely because your Yubels can still deal damage with Nightmare Pain active, your Prankatops can still be activated under it. It actually puts in a heck of a lot of work, and it kind of simplifies the game state for you, and will hurt your opponent more than it will hurt you. Now obviously as soon as they out the Nightmare Pain, you're in a tad bit of trouble. All you're going to do is float into your next Yubel, but the whole idea is that you're going to control the board at such a very basic rate state that getting rid of Nightmare Pain is not going to be their first port of call. They're going to want to try and get rid of the Skill Drain before they hit the Nightmare Pain. So you're kind of balancing everything out and going down that route. Again, this is one of the ones that I don't mind if Konami go, you know what, yeet, let's get rid of those, because then you can change it up. Another kind of element that I would like, but I'm highly expecting Beatrice to be banned as well, was I was testing previously with Beatrice in the extra deck. I was playing Rise to Full Heights, Angel of Blue Tears, because then I had a very good option off of Tempai, but then you could also go for something like a D-Barrier and a DDG. But like I said, I expect Beatrice to get banned, so I was like, you know what, let's play the deck so that I'm a little bit ahead of the game when the ban list drops. If Beatrice doesn't get banned, cool, I can update it and go from there, but I'll be massively surprised if it doesn't. So that, ladies and gentlemen, is it for the Yubel profile. Like I said, I've tried to give you as much information as possible rather than just going, playing 2 of this, 3 of this, 4 of that, 1 of that. 4 of that, yeah, don't think we can play 4 of that in Yugioh. But the idea behind this video is just to give you as much information as possible. Whether you're going to be facing it, whether you're looking to play it, I definitely think this is going to be one of the decks of the upcoming format, especially with Snake Eyes teetering on the edge of getting absolutely clapped out of the game. But you never know, Konami might be like, okay, let's retrospectively hit Yubel as well, so that this doesn't go and dominate and take over. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. If you do have any questions at all, by all means, like I said before, put them in the comments down below. I'll be more than happy to answer them. For now, as absolutely always, stay safe, and of course, happy dueling.